the program for today. So let me just briefly summarize how we're going to be doing things. So shortly we'll be joined by Martina Pertoldi from the Joint Research Centre in Seville, who will be doing two things, giving us an overview of the series, talking a bit about the JRC's work, talking a bit about the handbook generally, and then also setting the scene for today's discussion about the strategic dimension. Sally's then going to come in and help us take the temperature, maybe that's not the right phrase, of the audience, to see who's in the room and what our starting point is. We're then going to be just shuffling the pack a little bit, in fact. We're going to be going to Sabrina Abdi from the French Ministry to give us a national picture from France. And then we're going to take a short break. After that, we'll be hearing from Tuula Antola from the city of Espoo on behalf of the 6th Finnish City Strategy, looking to make the links with smart specialisation. And then we'll be hearing from Ruud van Rack, who's a programme manager with the Opportunity for West programme in the Netherlands. We also have joining us Thomas de Betoon from DG Regio, who will be jumping into the conversation at various points, also shining a light on the future cohesion policy, what's coming down the tracks. And then we'll say a few words at the end about what happens in our next session, which is on the 9th of November. So that's what's on the menu today. That's what's on our agenda. I'm going to ask Sally to come in just now then, and maybe just take us through the first poll, Sally, just to see who's in the room. Thanks.
Hi, thanks, Ed, and good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be joining you all with participants, 127 right now from all across the European Union. I'm going to be the co-moderator throughout this series of 6 webinars in November, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about sustainable urban development with these 6 building blocks from the JRC Handbook, which we're going to hear more about shortly from Martina. Today, my job is going to be listening in and watching the chat for your comments and questions. So as Ed said, please use the chat on the right-hand bar of the WebEx screen. But right now, we're going to start with finding out who's in the room. So your first chance to get involved with a poll. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen the poll bar. And we're asking you the question, what kind of organisation do you represent today? With lots of different answers. So please go ahead. Click on one of those. You have the chance to answer one of those examples: managing authority, city authority, university, NGO. So click on the answer and submit. You've got a minute left. I think the clock's still running. I'm going to ask Vasily how many people have submitted a response so far. Vasily, could you tell us how we're doing with that?
Almost everybody.
Almost everybody, great. So like 5 more seconds to put your answer in, and then we'll have a look and see who we've actually got in the room in terms of what kind of organisation you're working for and what perspective you bring as a participant to these webinars. So okay, let's switch to the results, please, Vasily, and we'll see who we've got in the room. Okay, from the bar graph there, we have no answer. 51 people didn't answer, but we have, as far as I can see, the biggest response group was people from cities, which is kind of what you'd expect in a webinar on urban development. So we have 25 people from city authorities, 19 from managing authorities. So that's interesting perspective too, the people who are generally speaking designing and implementing the operational programs for structural funds across the European Union. And then we have a small number of people from universities, from NGOs, and 2 from national ministries. So quite a lot of different voices coming, which is great. We'd like to hear your different perspectives on what we're going to talk about in the next 2 hours. So let's launch the next poll, please, Vasily. We've got another poll for you now. Please do answer the poll. So no answer people, let's get involved next time and answer the poll. So could we launch poll number 2, please? It will come up in the chat bar shortly. Here we go. So the next question is a bit more simple. You have 3 answers there. And we would like to know how you would rate your understanding of sustainable urban development. So do you feel that you're highly knowledgeable and very experienced? Do you feel like you have some knowledge but still lots to learn? Or are you quite new to this topic and you really need to get a better understanding of what we mean by sustainable urban development? We've got a minute for this poll. Let's see if you could all answer, please, and submit. This is anonymous. Nobody can see the answer linked to your name, so please feel free to tell us how you think your threshold knowledge is coming into these webinars. It helps us to understand that. Vasily, how are we doing? How's the response rate?
100.
Great, 100 out of 142. So I hope people are managing to see the poll questions in the right hand of the WebEx screen. I'm assuming everybody can see it. Maybe there's a little trouble when people haven't used this screen before. But the poll has ended now, so let's look at the results. Could post the results, please, Vasily. We'll see what level of knowledge people already have about the topics of these webinars. Just waiting to see the bar charts there. Here we go. Most people have put themselves in the middle on level B, so some knowledge, 76 people. We have 9 people only who feel highly knowledgeable. We would need your, please contribute your knowledge in any case if you feel you have something to add to these debates and questions and presentations today. We'd like to hear from especially those 9. And 25 people who feel they're very new to this. So a kind of a mixed bag, but most people feel they're somewhere in the middle. They've got some knowledge, but they're joining in to find out more. So let's go to the final poll for the moment before we launch into some of the discussions. Poll number 3, please. Let's have that in the same place on the right-hand side of the screen. And we'll see the questions shortly. Here we go. 1 minute to answer the question, which is, what's your main motivation for taking part in this webinar today? Do you want to get a better understanding? Do you want to hear good practice examples from across Europe? To build your network? To find out about the new programming period, so what's going to be different potentially in cohesion policy going forward? To find out more about the Urban Development Network, and if you can find more ways to support your work or other. So please submit your answer. You've got 30 seconds left, I think. Just to let us know which of those you think is the main reason for you being part in these webinars. How are we doing, Vasily? How many people have answered?
90 people.
90. Okay, we're still getting 100.
110.
Oh, great. Good. So we're past the 2/3. Great. We're getting more of a majority answering. Just quickly answer why you're joining us today. It helps us to also make sure we tailor these webinars to your needs better. Let's go for the results then, Vasily, and see what people have said. Which of those were the most popular reasons?
1 minute, couple of seconds for the users.
Okay. And we hope that we'll be able to meet your needs in this whole webinar series. This is the first of 6 today. We'll find out more about the others at the end of this webinar. So most people, let's see, the biggest answer was to find out about sustainable urban development in the future, that is. A question that was answer D, but also to get a better understanding and to hear good practice. Well, that's good. We're pleased about those results because that's pretty much what we're going to offer you in the next 2 hours. So hopefully by the end of this 2 hours this morning, and certainly by the end of the 6 webinars, we'll have helped to develop a better understanding of what we mean by sustainable urban development. You're definitely going to hear good practice from a lot of cities across Europe and find out a bit more from the European Commission directly about how to prepare for the future programming period and the future of structural funds. Any surprises there for you, Ed, on those results?
Not really. I mean, but it's really helpful to see the spread. And then just on that last poll where people are saying they want to find out more about, how sustainable urban development works, we'll be recording the content. We'll be sharing all of the presentations. We'll be following up with you with a questionnaire survey at the end of the series to get your feedback on how useful this has been, how we can build on this. So, we're in active listening mode here. So we're really keen to find out what you need going forward from the UDN, how the handbook can be best mobilized and used in your different situations. So all of this is just really helpful for us in terms of being able to pitch our content in the right way towards you. So let's keep moving. And we've finished there by talking a little bit about sustainable urban development, by talking a little bit about why we're here. I'm going to hand over now to Martina Pertoldi. Martina has been instrumental, one of the core members of the team who's pulled together the handbook on sustainable urban development. She's going to talk first of all a little bit about that work, and then set the scene on our session today where we're going to be sort of homing in on this question of the strategic dimension. Okay, Martina, the floor is yours. It's really nice to see you. Great to have you with us. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say to us this morning.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm trying now to share my PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. Let me know if you can see it. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
It's time now to, thanks, Eddie. Indeed, it's time now to start addressing the main topic of this webinar. And my name is Martina Pertoldi, and I will do it right now. My name is Martina Pertoldi. Excuse me, I'm not. Okay, now it's working. My name is Martina Pertoldi from the Joint Research Center, which is the in-house knowledge and science service of the European Commission. And I will present today the handbook in a nutshell, and then I will focus on the strategic dimension. First of all, I would like to thank you for participating in this webinar. Okay. First of all, I would like to share with you the objectives of the webinar series, which is organized by the Urban Development Network of the European Commission to disseminate the Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development Strategy that was published in January 2020 by the Joint Research Center in collaboration with the DG Regio. A second aim of this webinar series is to facilitate policy learning and also finally to get feedback to improve the methodological support that we can provide to you. The UDN is the perfect space where to present the handbook. In fact, its mission is to review how European funds are implemented on the ground, to support information exchange between sustainable urban development cities and urban innovative action cities, and also to promote a direct dialogue as we are doing now between the Commission and cities. So coming to the Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development, I will now explain you in a nutshell what it is and for whom it was developed. The Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development Strategies aims to help policymakers in the design and implementation of integrated urban strategies. But it doesn't refer to urban development as such. On the contrary, it tackles a very specific measure for sustainable urban development within the European regional policy in this programming period and in the next one. This is a very important point to be understood in order to take the right angle from which we have developed the handbook. In fact, given its position, the handbook targets not only local authorities as cities, but also managing authorities like regional or national government that are responsible for EU policy, and as well as practitioners and other relevant stakeholders that can make a contribution to the final aim, the final objective of sustainable urban development. How it works in practice. The handbook is structured around 6 building blocks, the main principles of the EU integrated approach to urban development. These principles have been refined along the years in the development of the EU discourse on urban matters. And they are strategic dimension, territorial focus, governance, cross-sector integration, funding and finance, and monitoring. We'll have the chance in this webinar series to address all of them in details as we do in the handbook. Of course, all of them are also very much interlinked, but it's also true that each of them presents specific features that deserve tailored investigation. So how the handbook tackled those principles? The handbook tried to operationalize them, and to do that, it defined the most critical and recurrent issues and challenges in the process of strategy making. So, as you can see in this diagram, for each building block, a number of issues at stake are identified, and for each issue at stake, a number of challenges. Challenges are then posed as questions, and the handbook tries to answer to those questions, and in doing that, to propose solutions to those challenges. And how it works, it provides examples from practices across Europe. It builds data analysis on the basis of a specifically developed database and web tool that is called Stratboard. Also point out critical bottlenecks you must pay attention to. And finally, it also provides additional resources like existing tools, studies, or platform where we can have a look to get more information. And from this wealth of information and analysis, it distills recommendation for the different issues at stake. The handbook is part of a larger knowledge for policy platform hosted under the Urban Data Platform Plus and managed by the JRC. On the Urban Data Platform Plus, you will find not only the handbook, but also Stratboard, the database and web tool we have developed our analysis with. And now I'm very happy also to present the last development regarding the handbook. We have just moved from a document to a web page where you can find the full report, you can find the executive summary, you can find the link to Stratboard, and also you can find the different chapters, the different building blocks of the handbook. We also plan to upgrade in the future this web page with more digital content and tools. After this short overview, it's time now to enter the topic of this webinar, so we can imagine that we are assessing the strategic dimension page on our handbook online. And I will share with you some first key reflections. I will provide some evidence-based data on the current situation, and then we'll address issues and challenges. So why we've decided to address the strategic dimension first? Well, the first reason is that the EU integrated approach promotes strategic thinking for the development of urban areas. Strategies are the centerpiece of sustainable urban development measures. Also, considering the position of SUD strategies in the EU regional policy, we also see that SUD strategies represent a different way of working in a multi-level governance system. In fact, we can say they contribute to set the urban within the regional under a common place-based approach. Another important point is that strategies are considered as collective roadmaps aimed at triggering a desired change. It means that the strategy aims to move from point 0 to point 1 together, working together. And finally, SUD strategies do not take place in a vacuum. They overlap with other strategic frameworks. And this requires even more efforts in terms of policy coordination. All these key points are also reflected in the landscape, in the highly diverse landscape that we can observe in the current period. Just to give you some numbers, we have more than 1,000 SUD strategies currently implemented across Europe, and more than 100 managing authorities in charge of SUD. So considering these numbers, it's not surprising that we can observe a wide spectrum, a wide range of approaches, from small-scale projects to urban regeneration strategies, and even larger strategic frameworks for area-based intervention. Finally, in few but emblematic cases, we can also observe that strategies have been organized as a collaborative platform to develop a challenge-led agendas. So a very heterogeneous policy approach that is matched by some data on the ground. So, for example, we can see in terms of funding a very diverse situation. Also in terms of coexistence between legacy with the previous pre-existing strategies and attempts of innovative approaches. And finally, we cannot underestimate at all the role of national arrangements and the existence of national agendas, when they are in place and when they are not. This makes also a huge difference in the way SUD strategies are framed and then designed and implemented. Coming to the main issues and related challenges that we have identified for the strategic dimension building block, first, we have seen strategies as bridges between operational program and projects. This issue relates to the fact that for their intrinsic nature, we have possibly divergent views on what SUD strategies are for urban authorities and managing authorities. This conflict is inherent to the nature of SUD and must first acknowledged and then addressed. Second, strategies are not simply a sum of intervention to be financed by the operational program, but they require a different mindset, and for that they also need new skills and capacity. And finally, they also they imply a move from good design to good implementation. For that reason, we have identified 3 challenges that we think are more problematic and require additional support. How to ensure that SUD strategies bridge operational programs and local policies, how to enhance strategic capacity at local level, and also how to ensure that SUD strategies and projects are aligned. During this webinar, we have the chance to learn with Rotterdam and their SUD strategies how they have faced the issue of SUD strategies as link with the operational programs and with the projects. And also, we think that the Rotterdam case, as you will see during the webinar, is also a good illustration of the first recommendation that we list in the handbook. The fact that there is a need to build the SUD strategies as an integrated planning process that works across governance levels and policy sectors, and also it requires a strong vision in order to ensure coherence and results. The second issue that we have identified for this chapter refers to the need of developing synergies with other policy frameworks. In fact, SUD strategies come after a long tradition of strategy making in cities. So they must refer to existing city reference strategies, usually larger than SUD strategies, but also to national urban agendas when they are in place, and to EU and global agendas. Just think about the SDGs or the urban agenda for the European Union. And also, we wanted to underline the possible relevant role of innovation development strategies under the innovation-led development strategies promoted under cohesion policy. So the 3 challenges that we have identified for this issue are how to build an SUD strategy when a strategy for the city already exists, what connection can we work out, how to connect SUD strategies with the national and global urban agendas, and finally, how can SUD strategies develop synergies with the regional and national research and innovation strategies for smart specialization. Also in this case, we have the French National Urban Policy helping us to better understand how SUD strategies can be connected with the national urban agendas. And also in this case, from the French Politique de la Ville and their work on SUD, we can extract some lessons learned that remind about some recommendations in the handbook. First, the fact that member states should align SUD strategies to domestic policies as much as possible. And where any national urban policy does not exist, develop purpose-built schemes. That, for example, would be the case of Italy. Another recommendation that is connected to the role of national urban agendas and national networks is the fact that they can provide learning opportunities in a very effective ways. And this also will be seen along the presentation of the French National Urban Policy. Finally, we'll have the 6 city strategies from Finland with us, and in this case, we'll tackle a very specific challenge, how we can develop synergies with the smart specialization. And in this case, for example, we can see recommendations working at two levels. On the one side, at city level, where open innovation platforms can be promoted, but also on the other side, at the level of managing authorities, to ensure that cities participate in the definition of the priority of smart specialization strategies in order to bring together and join efforts for more effective action. This is the end of my presentation. Here you can find the link to the Handbook online and the contact of the team that is working on the Handbook to provide you more support. Many thanks indeed.
Thanks a lot, Martina. Well done. That's really helped set the scene both for the content overall and for the role of JRC and where UDN fits in. And also, you've now set up our three kind of key points which link to our presentations, which you'll be hearing from shortly. So that's really, really helpful. Stanley's reminded you on the chat bar that all the content will be shared online. Also, please join the conversation as we jump to Rotterdam shortly, as we go to France, as we go to Finland. Please come in with comments, questions, observations, so we can join you into our discussions today. So just before we go to Ruud in Rotterdam, let's just take a little pause and go back out to the audience. Let's go back to one of our polls. Let's just hear what you think some of the key issues are in relation to some of the things which Martina has just shared with us. So Sally, I'm going to bring you back in with Vasily, maybe just to quickly run through these polls, and then we're going to go to Ruud in Rotterdam for our next presentation. So Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Martina, for that really comprehensive overview of the handbook and what we're going to talk about today in terms of strategy. So we're going to do 3 quick questions now to see what your position in relation to developing urban strategies. Same as last time, the poll will be in the right-hand side of the screen where the chat box is normally. Thanks for the first question, Vasily. Here's the first question. We are asking you, how would you best describe the city authority's role in the design and implementation of sustainable urban development measures in operational programs? So there are several different, 4 different options here for you to decide which you think is most appropriate to either the city in which you work, or the city, if you don't work directly in a city, the cities with which you work, or think of a particular case that you're most familiar with. So would you say that cities are at the heart of the process, cities are only involved on specific issues, or cities are peripheral to the main process, or you don't know? So if you make a choice between your view on the city's role in designing and implementing operational program strategies, and you've got a long time for this poll, but we probably don't need quite that length of time. Vasily, how are we doing with responses?
We are reaching right now 100.
100. So we've got 167 people on board. Let's try and get a few more answers before we go to the results of that poll. We want to see to what degree, in your experience, cities are central to this process. Let's see what the current status is according to your perceptions at local level. How many people now, Vasily? Can we go to the results yet?
Yes, I think we're ready to get the results.
Okay, let's put the results up on screen and see how people answered that question. So we should see the results shortly in the same box, in the poll box on the right-hand side. Waiting to see what you think in terms of cities, the centrality or not of cities' role in operational programs. Okay, well that's pretty positive. We had 73 out of 166 saying cities are at the heart of the process. 29 only involved on certain issues, and only 12 people saying they thought cities are peripheral, but 48 people not answering. So quite a lot of people maybe don't have a view on that or don't have experience of it, but from people who do take a view on it, that's really positive to see that people think that cities are very central in the development of operational programs. And let's see how we make that more of a trend going forward and how we improve cities' voice in the development of operational programs. Okay, can we have the next poll, please, Vasily? Same thing on the right-hand side. Let's see what the next question is.
Sure. Just a moment.
Okay.
That's why we've got this little pause. It may be worth just saying to people that if, okay, over to you, Sally, I'll come back.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So second question is, how would you assess the capacity of city authority officials to design and implement sustainable urban development strategies? So if you are working in a city or if you work with cities, think about what your assessment of the capacity to do this. Is it very high? So city authority staff have lots of knowledge and experience. Is it medium? City officials have good experience, but are on a big learning curve how to design and implement sub-strategies. Or is it low? This way of working is new and there's a lot to learn. So just tell us what you think from your perspective the capacity currently is for city authorities to do this work, to develop strategies in the way that Martina just outlined. And we've got 165 people. Let's try and get more people answering this time. That's an easy one. Just three possible answers there, low, medium or high. See what you think. How are we doing, Vasily, on the response rate?
We are doing great. Let's give them a couple of seconds.
A few seconds more. Please all just click a button and submit, and then we'll see what we think the capacity is. So we see cities are very central. Let's see how the capacity is of cities to do this work going forward. Okay, let's close the poll now and see what the answer is. The answer should come up on the right-hand bar. Then after this, we're going to have one more question, and I'm going to be handing back to Ed for the first intervention from a city, a managing authority, actually. So let's see the result of this poll. Okay, that's quite interesting. So only 12 people thought cities have a very high capacity. 65 out of 165 thought the capacity was medium, so they know something, but they're still on a learning curve. And 44 think it's pretty low, that this is a very new way of working for a lot of city officials. We didn't correlate that answer against who answered, whether it's cities answering or other people answering, but that's quite interesting to see that, in a sense, these webinars and the handbook are important to help build that capacity to work this way. It's a new way of working, so support is needed to do that, and that's the whole purpose, really, of this webinar series. So, Vasily, can we go into the last poll at this stage of the game, please? The last poll, which we're going to be asking.
Of course.
Thank you. And let's this time we're going to be asking you what you think the biggest barriers are to that. So if there's a lack of capacity, what are the barriers to working this way? So you can answer, what is the single biggest barrier to design and implementation of effective sustainable urban development strategies? You've got various choices there: lack of technical capacity, mismatch between the priorities of the city authority and the operational program, the complexity of the funding streams. There might be legislative or regulatory obstacles that get in the way, timescale pressures, so getting plans approved, getting procurement done, which can be a lengthy process, and anything else which you could specify in the chat. If it's not one of those barriers, it's something else we'd like to know. We'd really like to know what you feel the barriers are if we've not got captured them in this poll as well. So please choose one of those and submit your answer, and we'll see where the barriers are to being able to design and implement these strategies. 165 people on board. Let's see, how are we doing with, great, we've got a chat there. Thank you, Paloma. We'll come back to that in a minute. So, Vasily, how many people have answered at this point?
100, so we're closing right now.
We'll close. We need you to participate in these polls for them to be valid and scientific, so please do be responsive. But let's just see what the people who responded of 100, let's see what they think were the biggest barriers. So could we get the results on screen in a moment, and then we'll pick up in the chat. Okay, so we've got the highest number was the mismatch between priorities, so that's quite interesting, that the priorities between the city and the operational program don't match up. Then we have, after that, complexity of funding streams, and there's a whole simplification process, but obviously still the funding streams are quite complex, and a lack of technical capacity to design and implement. And then finally, we've got the timescale pressures. Interesting, only 2 people said it was legislative, obstacles, but time pressure, which is understandable, getting your plans in place, being able to procure the right services or infrastructure investment maybe takes too long. So that's quite interesting on the polls. I'm going to hand back to Ed, and I'll just check in the chat if we got some other answers before we move on. Okay, over to you, Ed. What do you make of that?
Thanks, Sally. I mean, again, just really helpful, and we're just about to go, this point of the mismatch between priorities, and we're about to go to Rotterdam to hear about how we square the circle between city priorities, wider regional priorities. I think also Martina helped set the scene earlier on by talking a bit about the how do we develop a sustainable urban development strategy, which takes account of existing strategies, which looks at the different territorial levels. We'll be talking about territoriality in our second session. Funding came in there. We're talking about funding in our fifth session. So we've in a sense we've boxed these into 6 sessions, but there's lots of read across between them, which we'll be touching upon in the different conversations. So that's great to see. So I'm going to jump over to Rotterdam. Very happy to have Ruud van Rijk with us from the Managing Authority in West. Ruud, great to see you. We had a few technical issues this morning, so today you have a number and not a name, but that's a long story which we'll be picking up on afterwards. Super, you can join us. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're very, very busy at the moment, and the floor is yours. Thank you. Just unmute yourself, Ruud. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I have a very warm welcome also from my side, from Rotterdam. I'm Ruud van Rijk, not the number, and I'm the Managing Authority for the ERDF program of the West Netherlands, and also the Program Manager of the ITI part of this program for Rotterdam. So I'll try to tell something of our case in the South Bank of Rotterdam. Next slide, please. Yeah, my opinion was that we can't do sustainable urban development by just giving urban projects money. The handbook is full of it, that it works better, and I'm myself very convinced of it, that it's much more about the strategy and also the implementation plan which you design together with the city and the partners and the stakeholders and the inhabitants that make a success of urban development in a strategic way. So I try to explain how we did it. I will do that next slide in three manners. I will first give a short view about the approach of the South Bank of Rotterdam and the history of ERDF with sustainable urban development in our city. And then I will focus a little more of how we did combine, the bridge was mentioned by the previous speaker, the ERDF and the ESF programs within this large sustainable strategy in an ITI, and I will end with some lessons learned from our opinion. So next, please. The main questions which I was asked, referring to the handbook, was how to ensure that the strategic urban development strategies bridge the operational programs and the local policies, and how to ensure that the projects are aligned. And I hope I will give you some insight how we try to do to cover these issues. Next, please. Now, we are believers from the first hour. I'm a real believer, and I'm not in there for 30 years. I'm only in there for a little more than 10 years. But Rotterdam is in there from the first moment. There were some urban pilots with ERDF money already in the end of the 80s and the early 90s of the previous century. And I was told that London, Milan, and Rotterdam were the first to join. So we have already a long marriage between SUD and ERDF. And all that time, so almost more than 30 years, we had in Rotterdam sustainable urban development programs combined with ERDF operational programs. So we have quite a lot of experience. There were some different approaches during the times, during the different periods. And there was one period, especially 2007, 2013, when there was not really a very strong strategic approach above the operational program. And then you saw immediately that it became more subsidizing individual projects, and there was no one 1 and 1 is 3 added value in the total approach. So that's why we turned again to an ITI approach, which is integrated, and we were very much helped because there was already a national integrated approach for the deprived area South Bank of Rotterdam. It was developed just before this program period, so around 2010. So we could use it easily, and it was much more easy that we could fit in the operational program in that large-scale policy development than do it the other way around, because it had all the requirements which are also in the handbook to be of success. It was a multi-sector policy, so it didn't only put the economic or the social or the physics side of the area development, but in an integrated way, and it was also multi-governance. So there's also a national part. It's called a national program in the Netherlands. It's the only national program for an urban area which is supported for more over than 20 years by the national government. And now there's also European money in it, and of course also the local level is involved, so it has really all the characteristics of multi-governance. Also on the finance, it was multi-funding. Local money was in it, but also money from the national government and ERDF and ESF, for example, and also smaller programs from Europe contributed to the total strategy to improve the life and the development of the South Bank of Rotterdam, which was the former harbor area, and lost its goal by moving the harbors to the sea. We even used in the previous program the Jessica funds, and then it was called Sophie. We have a daughter of Jessica, and it's helping also with loans and guarantees to fit the right finance to the right intervention. Also for the stakeholders, it was coping with the handbook approach because multi-stakeholders, about 17, signed a large agreement, and it was from all sides of the stakeholders in the program area, so housing corporations, education, municipalities, firms, they all signed a real large-term commitment to improve and to contribute to the strategy for the South Bank. And of course it was place-based to this area. Next slide, please. Then I make it a little more concrete, but at first, before I show you what we really did in this strategic urban development, it's good to know what priorities we chose to combine with this strategic urban development, and it was quite easy to choose them because the problems were, as I told, very integrated, and then it was very helpful that we could use 8B, the supporting of the labor market, emphasizing new skills for new jobs, and combine that in ITI with physical, economic, and social recovery of the southern area. So that combination worked very well. It made added value, and it also helped to use also European Social Fund money and European Regional Fund money together within one ITI. Next slide, please. Then you see here the target area. It's quite a large area. 1/3 of the population of Rotterdam lives there. 29% of the children grow up in poverty here. It's really by far the poorest area of the Netherlands. 26% of the children have parents with no or low formal education. 74 are first, second generation migrants, and 2,000 young people enter the labor market every year. So it's a very young population. It's very odd in the total area of the Netherlands, which is very prospering and which has especially elder people to emphasize. But here we have a very large labor potential, but it doesn't fit with the economic development in this area. Next, please. Then the strategic approach itself. You see here a circle, and that makes the image of an integrated approach, which was at the heart of the strategic urban development strategy. We believed after a large part of analysis that it didn't help when we just in sole isolation supported school or made education better or put some money in the labor market when we don't recognize the whole circle which has need to develop. It begins behind the front door, because a lot of debts are in the households and there are a lot of problems behind the doors which have the result that a lot of people can't take part in the daily labor and in the daily and can't participate in society. So you have to intervene on all three parts together to be effective. So when we had, especially from the European Social Fund, I'll tell a little more later, also very interventions which got behind that front door and helped difficult families to develop and to come out of their debts and then go afterwards to school and take part in the labor market. And then the circle is around, because when they have an education and they have a good job, then there comes more prosperity and more demand for better houses, and we can also work on the green goals to have the energy and the energy transition and the climate transition in these areas. But you can't start just there when the other things laying behind doesn't get an intervention. So that was more the philosophy about the national program of the South to intervene in all parts of the circle in a strategic way and in an integrated way. I give some more concrete examples, then maybe it gets more to a living. Next slide, please. Now, the problems were that I already told, the future labor market needs are not really what was available in the 2,000 young people who are delivered to the labor market every year from this area. They didn't have, they were dropouts. They didn't have the right skills for the future skills agenda, and that's why there was also a combination with the Roadmap Next Economy, which was a large economic program for and upskilling and working together in this area to meet more the skills of the future. And it were very concrete things which were done. You see that in the other points. There was a career and talent orientation program for pupils from 9 to 16. And already when they were at the age of 13, they get a career start guarantee. It was very early. They can commit to a certain firm who made sure that they got a job when they finalized their education. So that gave a lot of assurance and it gave a lot of motivation to that young people to get a good education, because they already knew they could work somewhere afterwards, and they were also coached by that firm during their middle education age. And then, of course, there was also invested in that firms, impact investment on social entrepreneurs, but also at firms who gave the career start guarantees, so they could make some free time and get a little money for it to help the new skills, or to get them on board and to get them a career in a good education and help them to find a job. Next slide, please. Then the ERDF part. What did we do with the ERDF part of the ITI on the South Bank? We made more programs with firms and schools together, with collaborating approaches to fill the gap between demand and supply of labor forces. There were, of course, firms complaining that schools were not delivering the people they had to know, and of course, schools said, you should help us because we don't have the right opportunity, and we don't have the right tools to give them the right skills when we don't know them. So they built programs together, and they also helped a lot each other young people were able to work with firms and in firms, and the firms contributed to the curriculum vitae from the new education lesson. So there was a lot of kind of that programs, and also there were some interventions for people, for dropouts and people who didn't finalize school or couldn't find a new job, second generation migrants, for example, to help them also to get in such a program so that they could and upskill themselves and were helped. And a very important thing is that they are not helped until the moment they get their diploma, but especially afterwards, because we saw a lot of in the beginning that people who were getting a job didn't have the right skills, and there was not enough coaching from the firms to help them, and so more or less 1 or 2 years you need after finalizing and getting the job in coaching to get a relation and to get a long-lasting job.
We have about 3 more minutes for it.
Yes, I think I'm coming to the lessons learned. I have one from the ESF. I can give some examples next slide. And then I come to the lessons learned. The ESF approach was also a little different than the general ESF approach. There were a lot of more intense, more personal and frequent attention, not stopping at the front door. As I said, one work supervisor for behind the front door, for the contacts with the schools, for the contacts with the firms, functional address training, and just more expertise and longer interventions from the ESF side, not only to reintegration in the labor market, but also on death recovery and on language improvement from the ESF side. So more intensive interventions were done in these ITI areas. How did it work? Finally, the lessons learned. The next slide. We had an evaluation last year, and the results were that from both sides, from ERDF and ESF, we found much added value by working together on the economic and social solutions. And I found it myself, coming from the economic part, quite amazing how city development and social affairs have learned here from each other's work and didn't know much of it before. So it really helped to have a strategic program where we were more or less committed to each other. And then we found out that we really could make 1 + 1 in 3. The strategic urban development strategies help to give investments for more added value. Requirements mentioned in the handbook turned out very well and to work it effectively. Did all go right? No, not everything went right. We had some technical problems with the delivery of the both funds. So when we were able to set some goals, then in future we would try to combine them in one program, because we had in the back office solve a lot of difficulties, because we have 2 delivery mechanisms for ESF and ERDF in Rotterdam. ESF is a national program where we are more or less the receiver of the money, and for ERDF we are the managing authority. So it were different rules, and it had in the back office we hope that the project didn't find very much harm of it, but we couldn't prevent that they were also suffering a little from it. So that was a lesson learned. And then we had also some comments from the maybe you can say it's a good or a bad thing, but we were accused from some discrimination, because the people from the South Bank got a lot of more help and a lot of more interventions than the other people, and then we got some rumors from other areas in the city. Why can't we have that? We have also people who want to start career and who want some extra coaching, and we have also firms who want to help. So you must say in Brussels that they are discriminating by doing such place-based, dedicated, integral approaches only for the people who are lagging behind. So that maybe it's a good thing, because then it proves that we did something which was worth, which had some value, but it also is maybe thing to elaborate a little on and to think about this kind of image we get then when we do something extra for an area lagging behind. I think there were the 3 minutes you gave me.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much, Ruud. Thank you. That's great. Thanks a lot for your candor and honesty at the end. I mean, I think those insights are really valuable in that final slide. We're going to do two things now. First of all, we're going to bring in our rapporteur, and then I'm going to ask Sally to join us with some of the questions you've been asking in the chat bar. But over to our rapporteur first. So I'm a Scotsman who spends a lot of my time working in Rotterdam. Our rapporteur today is a Dutchman who has a better Scottish accent than me. So that's the way the world sometimes works. Arno, great to see you. Your role has been to be an active listener, to tune into these first inputs, and just give us some headlines of what you're picking up, what are the key messages coming from what Ruud and Martina have just said to us.
Yes, thank you very much, Ed. Yeah, no, so yeah, I've been based in Scotland for a while now, so hopefully you can still understand me. But yeah, no, I've worked on SUD for a while now, for both the European Commission and for the World Bank and for some national governments as well. So thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure to listen to both Martina and Ruud. I'd like to start with congratulating Martina and her colleagues from the JRC with the Handbook, which I think is a very valuable resource, which draws from a lot of data and a lot of other resources, and pulls this all together into something that we can use as policymakers and people that are interested in SUD. Also, Ruud, thank you very much for your presentation on Rotterdam. It's a case study that looked at sort of the beginning of the program period, so it's very interesting to hear kind of how things have progressed and how things have worked out. Yeah, just to pick up on a number, just some points that are maybe worth highlighting. I think both Martina and Ruud mentioned sort of the intellectual origin, if you like, of the SUD approach, which goes back a long way further, but was rooted within the current approach anyway, is rooted within the Barker report, which recognizes kind of the uniqueness of the contextual and territorial factors that play a key role in economic development. And I think, therefore, it's important to recognize that the SUD approach is not a prescriptive approach as such, and neither is the Handbook really. It really recognizes the diversity of approaches, which also came out of Martina's presentations, and aims to facilitate kind of this diversity at the local level. So it recognizes also that strategies should be living documents, that there should be a process of review built into the design process. I think that's one of the important recommendations that come out of the strategy section of the Handbook. So yeah, some other key points, perhaps linked to the polls and some of the questions. You know, there was clearly sort of the links, the bridges between the OP and the strategies can be regarded as a difficulty, and integrating the thematic objectives can be challenging. And in that sense, the Handbook also helps in terms of, well, at least learning from other strategies of how they may have done this more effectively. I mean, yes, this prioritization process is always going to be a challenge, both at the local level and in terms of that bridge with the OP. Another key point, again, also linked to the poll, but also that Martina talked about, is around the building of administrative capacity at multiple levels. And I think that's very important when we look at SUD, that we recognize that this capacity needs to be built at different levels, not just at the local level, but at the regional, national, and supranational as well. And hopefully events like this help with that. Just specifically on the Rotterdam case study, I very much agree with Ruud's opening statement there, that European funding for projects should not be the starting point or the driver of SUD. SUD is much more than an accumulation of projects. It's an opportunity to define, and in some cases to refine, the development paths of the urban development paths of cities through these strategies to define the roadmaps, the outcomes that have been agreed with the local partners. And I think what the Rotterdam case really shows is that here we have a city that has had a long commitment to sustainable urban development, where these strategies have been commonplace, and yet we see that it is ever evolving, and that Rotterdam very much buys into the new tools that are on offer and recognize them as being valuable. So the ITI tool in this instance is a good example of that, where the city clearly recognized the opportunity of integrating ESF and ERDF as part of this tool. And this links very well to one of the recommendations in the handbook, where it states that existing strategies can be adjusted. So Rotterdam already had a strategy, but they can incorporate the relative innovative approaches that are offered as part of this European kind of framework of SUD. So I think that is a good recommendation, and particularly now that we're moving sort of in a, if you like, a second phase of SUD, when in the new program period, we can perhaps expect that cities, we say in English, sort of push the envelope more and try to kind of integrate more these kind of tools within the strategy, if they are helpful, of course, and if they are useful. Perhaps one specific point on that, which happens to a very limited extent in the current program period, or in the 2014-20 program period, is, for example, the integration of other European funds within sustainable urban development strategies like Horizon 2020, these type of funds, which offer additional opportunities for urban development. So I hope that's okay in terms of my reflections. I was told to keep it quite short.
That's brilliant, Arno. And I know it's incredibly difficult to, what you've done is just kind of condense things and just shine a light on specific things. It's a really, really challenging thing to do, but it's fantastic. And I like the way you picked up on both the comments very specifically, but also linked us into some of the other themes we'll be talking about in some of the other webinars, integration, finance, this territorial dimension, and also you did a little bit of forward looking, which is also helpful, because I see we've got Thomas de Batoon on the call too today. So Thomas, let me bring you in from DG Regio. A couple of maybe short observations from you before we ask Sally just to kind of open the lid on our chat box. I know we've got some nice questions there we want to pick up on for Ruud and for Martina. So Thomas, nice to see you. So what were you picking up from what you've just heard?
Thank you, Eddie. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Oh, okay, perfect. No, I just wanted to come in the middle of this webinar this morning, and taking up from what I heard on the first interventions, two things, really short. The first one is about the strategy. It's the time. We are here not speaking about a short time vision or mission. Strategy takes longer time than 1 year, or even longer time than a programming period. We could see it in the Rotterdam case. They speak about 15, 20 years work. And it's really the accumulation of the work on the strategy with the updates, with the changes that makes actually and creates the value of the strategy. And I think that this is one of the elements we should keep in mind when reflecting on how to develop the strategies. It's really this long time work which is needed. The second thing is and it's a consequence of it, is the political commitment. We are always in these cycles of political commitment at local level, with each time, every election, a new vision to come, but the strategy are passing through it and need to remain in the principles. There might be some updates, changes, and it's the same actually for the funding sources being, and we will hear it maybe later in the second part of this event. But it's also valid for the EU level. We have our own cycle. There is some new orientations, but somehow what remains constant, it's at local level the strategies that are grounded in the territories. And I just wanted to keep that as a reminder and as key elements I could note this morning. Thank you, Hedy.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. And this point of timescales, at the beginning when we had the second survey, a lot of people, maybe a third of people, said they were quite new to this. They're still feeling their way a little bit. And you can see from the Rotterdam sources, 30 years of iteration, tweaking, developmental, and it's still work in progress. So those are, don't be discouraged if you're finding this challenging and this is relatively new ways of working. Experience goes a long way. Just to let you know, we're going to take a break in a little while, but I'm going to ask Sally to come back in now, because Sally's been keeping an eye on the chat bar. Remember, and put your questions, comments in the chat bar. And I think we've got a few things to pick up there, Sally, which maybe we can feed into some of our speakers. So what can you share with us from what's going on with the audience?
Thanks, Ed. First of all, thanks for joining in the chat. There were some small issues to start with, which we have resolved. So please put any questions or comments in the chat, not in the Q&A, which might be a bit counterintuitive, but we're just going to stick with the chat. And can you make sure that when you put something in the chat, you make sure it's posted to everyone, so everyone can see and follow what's going on in the chat? I think we've got that working well now. Just wanted to bring in a couple of comments that we've had through the chat. First of all, on the poll, we had 2 people actually specify other challenges that weren't listed on the criteria we had in the poll. Jonas talked about the organisational capacity to support officials, and I suspect he means political representatives there. So how cities manage to support their elected representatives to develop sub-strategies. If I'm wrong, you can chat in and let me know, Jonas. We could come back to that. And Paloma made an interesting point that one of the challenges was that there is no legal definition or framework for sustainable urban development. So what does it actually mean? And also the word integrated isn't in the title that we're using, that surely integrated should be a key part of that concept. And we're going to have a webinar focused on integration on the 17th of November, but that's a really interesting point, that can we talk about sustainable urban development without using the word integration as well. Then we had a few questions for Ruud based on the Rotterdam case. Nora asked, what were the incentives for stakeholders to participate? Did they all benefit, and was there a competition to involve people in the ITI? And Vanya mentioned actually that an additional barrier for migrant participation was language skills, and that's potentially a really big barrier to achieving full potential. So that was more of a comment on the South Rotterdam case. And then finally, Sonia Puyol, who I know, hi Sonia, nice to have you on board, asked how to convince local policymakers about the need for SUD in small and medium-sized cities in particular. So looking at the scale of the city, especially when they might be overwhelmed by daily problems, how do you convince politicians in smaller cities to get involved in those strategies? So that's a summary of the questions. I know we don't have a huge amount of time, Ed, so I'll hand back to you to see how many of those we pick up now and maybe later, and some, of course, we'll deal with in future webinars too.
Thanks a lot, Sally. So I think in terms of time, we're running a little bit behind schedule. Let's maybe ask Martina. Martina's able to come in and just maybe make some observations on this question of the definition. How we can frame it, because some of this is about the concepts are very different. We talked about Europe's diversity, so maybe Martina may have some comments on that, and then maybe I'll ask Ruud just to if he wants to pick up on this question of incentives. We'll be talking about participation and governance models in our next webinar number 3, but it's been a really key part of the Rotterdam journey, so maybe you could reflect on that for us, Ruud, if you wouldn't mind. Martina, first of all, this is a question of terminology and what we understand by sustainable urban development, and the fact that it's sometimes a little bit of a kind of elusive term. What are your thoughts on the question we've had on that?
Yes, thanks for the questions. Very interesting. Well, I will start from the question: Can we address sustainable urban development without mentioning integration? No, we cannot, not at all. Actually, as I said in my presentation, everything is about the integrated approach, and the effort of the handbook is exactly to disentangle in practical terms what we mean with integration. Indeed, it's a very huge amount of possible interpretation and action, and this is the effort that we have done with the handbook. We can see SUD strategies in a way as in between regional policy and the places with their own specificities and their own territorial governance arrangements. This means that we need a high level of flexibility in order to meet those specificities, but flexibility does not mean, is not an excuse for not providing adequate guidance. On the contrary, it requires more guidance, more informed dialogue with people and policymakers that can find a common language in order to understand each other and to build a community of people that can really co-create. The title of this webinar is indeed how we can co-create strategies. And finally, we need more clarity, more transparency, and evidence-based in order to justify the choices that we make when we develop a strategy. At the point that Ruud made about this discrimination issue, indeed, you make choices, you must explain them in order for the intervention logic to be accepted, to be also supported by everyone that is involved in the development of the strategy. And indeed, all of this requires capacity, skills, both technical and intellectual skills, and it's crucial to provide this opportunity for capacity at EU level, as we are doing now, but also at national and sub-national level. And indeed, capacity is what we have tried to address with this handbook. You can see it as a learning tool. It's not a guide or guidelines. You must follow this, and tick the box. No, it's about providing you the methods and the tools to think about your own strategies and to develop the best solution for your own issues and development needs.
Thanks a lot, Martina. We'll be talking a lot more about capacity building as we go through this series, and we refer in the handbook to URBACT, to a whole range of other things which are bringing tools, instruments, how we build capacities, not just for officials, but also for elected members. So this conversation will continue. I'm going to hand back to Ruud just to make to pick up on this question of incentives for stakeholders. Just to share a little bit about what you've learned from Rotterdam and what would be helpful for the audience to hear. And then we'll just take a short break. So Ruud, how have you gone about this in Rotterdam, incentivizing participants and stakeholders? I think you're muted. Yeah.
I think two observations on that issue. I think the most important things were that we had partnerships which were built between education, schools and firms in ERDF projects, so they really could get. They participated. Also, firms participated in the projects and received some money, and by that they could be at the design table of how to of the approach, and they also got some money to make some free time for and to get some money for it. So that simple fact that they could take part in projects and they were at the design table of the beginning, that was of added value of the stakeholders. Then, and there were also some other instruments which were used. We have, for example, the learning work agreements, which are more at the strategic level and also from a little longer perspective, where they make agreements between in a certain sector, for example, healthcare. Between firms and municipality and education to a long-term collaboration, and that learn-work agreements also helped a lot to involve them, because sometimes there are some obligations. We have some obligations on social return on investment, for example, when a large firm wins a public procurement for development of an area, then he has to take on board some social requirements, getting people to work with a large distance to the labor market, and that sounds more or less as an obligation, and obligations are never good to help people on board. So by that learning work agreements, and also that they could involve on how to do it, and they are helped to meet that obligations, and even got some money that they could make some people free for a few hours a week. to find a good way, then it became more added value and more of themselves. So that two instruments, just taking them on board in ERDF projects and making some learning work agreements, which were centralized by the word help and not by the word obligation, were good examples to take them on board. And they enjoy it very much when firms, for example, are in a project, then they get more involved with the education of the young people in the area, and they even going to like it and don't see it as an obligation.
Thanks a lot, Ruud. A lot more to this Rotterdam story, and the kind of role that Sally and I have in these sessions. We all feel slightly guilty pushing everyone through because we could spend a lot more time diving more deeply, but there's lots of material. For example, the bridge project is on the UIA website. There's lots of material about the work learning agreements. We will be sharing Ruud's presentation, contact details, so there will be a chance to follow up if you're interested in going a bit more deeply. For the moment, we're going to take a short pause. If you want to go and do a bit of yoga, have a 2-minute stretch, grab yourselves a glass of water. We're going to pause for, it's 20 past now, let's pause until 25 past. We'll probably run the overall session until 12:15 this morning, so we had a little hiccup at the beginning getting started, but as Sally said, I think the chat's on board now, the tech. I won't say anything about the tech because that would be tempting fate, but we seem to be in a good place. Go and have a short break, folks. Join us for 5 more minutes. In 5 more minutes, we'll be jumping into our final presentations from France and from Finland. But thanks again to Martina and to Ruud for getting us started, and we'll see you all shortly. Thank you. Sorry for my coffee break slide. We've got another slide coming up just to get us back in. Here we are. Yeah. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a little time to have a break. Just to remind you that this session was due to run from 10 until 12. We've extended by 15 minutes, so I hope that doesn't cause too many problems. Hope you can stick with us. We'll be doing a little bit of retweaking after today, so we're hoping all the other sessions will run to time. So we're going to jump back in. We've got some background noise, actually. Can we speak up, Vasily? Yeah, thank you. So we're jumping back in. We're going to go now from Rotterdam to France. We're going to go to the Sabrina Abdi, who's the Program Director of the CGT, the French Urban Ministry. The brief to each of our speakers has been to give us a short insight into their perspective. We heard from Ruud from the Managing Authority side in Rotterdam. From Sabrina, we're going to hear from the national perspective in France. As we know, the landscape is very diverse across Europe, and the context and the structures for sustainable urban development are not consistent from one country to the other. So we thought it'd be very useful to lift the lid on a national example, just to see how those layers of connections operate, and also to see how those relationships work, and also to get a better understanding of what works well and what we might learn from that. So Sabrina, I'm very glad to have you with us. The floor is yours, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this session, and hello to everyone everywhere in Europe. So I'm sharing my presentation. Is it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I work at not the CGT. It has changed since the beginning of this year, and it's the National Agency for Cohesion of Territories, which is also interesting is that we are also in charge of the coordination of the European funds in our agency, and we are also in charge of a specific national urban policy, which is called Politique de la Ville. So I wanted first to give you like an overview of this policy to go deeper in how we have synergies and articulation with the European funds. So the law France has developed since decades, for like 40 years, a targeted policy to address urban issues for deprived neighborhoods. This policy has been redesigned in 2014, and it is based on a unique indicator, which is an indicator of poverty, to define those areas. So what is important also is that we have a huge coordination with all other ministries involved in this policy. So we have a specific budget and specific policy, but we are working in coordination with all the ministries and different actors. So for this, since 2014, so we have a new contract, which is like a strategy at intercommunal level, which embark also elected people, cities, the state, which is at local level, the NGO, to sign a contract. So this policy allows us to identify 1,540 priority neighborhoods in France mainland, but also in other territories. It represents almost 10% of the French population, and like in Rotterdam, there is a lot of young people living in those areas. So we have 445 city contracts involving 850 cities. So, and the city contract covers 3 key domains, which is the urban renewal, social action, and also cohesion, economic activities, and employment. So you can see that there is a link with the thematic objective of this programming period. So that's why we choose at national level to have this articulation. So the urban dimension of the structural fund and how we try to have this coordination between the national policy and the European funds to have really added value and to have more projects to be financed at local level. So based on previous experience in France from the last programming period, there was also a specific attention for those deprived neighborhoods. So the national authorities, with the in agreement with the regions, who are now the managing authorities of ERDF, have decided to support Politique de la Ville through an agreement at national level. This agreement was also translated in the law of 2014, to push people and actors to use funds in coordination with the city contract. And as I said, it is at the intercommunal strategy, which is the link also with the ITI or the SUD in France. So in the partnership agreement between France and the European Commission, we decided that the implementation of ERDF will be of 10% plus ESF, but the ESF, which is managed by the region to support Politique de la Ville. So we also at the CGET, we have put a network, a little bit like the UDN network, to improve, to coordinate, to inform, and to reinforce capacity building of people working at local level, implementing strategies, and by information, communication, working groups, but also by, how can I say, mixing people from Politique de la Ville and people who are working on European funds. So concretely, there is those managing authority has decided with their partnership, the local partnership, and in consultation with them, that we have 2 possibilities, Axis or ITI, but I will not be really long on this, and to have also integrated strategy with ERDF and ESF. But there was a little failure at the national level because mostly of regions have decided to use only ERDF for their strategy. Only 2 or 3 regions have decided to also finance with ESF, like Région Île-de-France, Paris regions, or Strasbourg. So there is flexibility in the implementation, and we have a non-homogeneous implementation of funds. So I wanted to illustrate really briefly the case of Strasbourg. Strasbourg has a good experience in the implementation of funds since other programming periods. So they have developed their strategy, including the politique de la ville in their strategy, which is also important also to highlight, is that they are intermediate body of ERDF and also ESF, which allow them to have really integrated strategy. So, and they also align the European funds with their own long-term strategy of Strasbourg, and to take into account the inhabitants, which is really important. So, like this, a lot of projects were financed in the promotion of social inclusion, like helping people to learn and read French, but also for young people who are unemployed, and also some equipment and digital training, etc. So they have a specific governance to manage the ITI, with a body responsible for technical and political validation, and also the technical committee with the long-term strategy. And in this governance, they also have actors of politique de la ville in their governance. So we made an assessment like at the midterm of the programming period. So I wanted to highlight the added value. There is also failure that we managed to see with this assessment. But there is some effect on SUD, is that it allows some cities to have a really long-term strategy with the multiple actors of the local level. It's also mobilized, and it helps to also secure some co-founding, which is really important. It has some effect on the governance of the territory, with a dialogue which is maintained between the local authorities and the NGO and the actors working on the field. And also it has also sustained territorial organization, because in 2014 there was also another organization of the territory of France, so it helps also. And we also had some effect on the projects, so it helped to find new project order, and also develop more ambitious projects. Another indirect effect which is a good effect, is that it helps also cities to go to other European programs like URBACT, but also Urban Innovative Actions, and it helps them to go further in the European projects, and they are now more in the scene of European, and they are more familiar with the European decision or program. And the last thing from this experience of contrat de ville, cities contract, we coordinate, France coordinate with Belgium, the partnership in the framework of the Urban Agenda for the EU, which was the Urban Poverty Partnership. And within this partnership, the action plan proposed a local pact for deprived neighborhoods. So we went through URBACT capitalization project, and we decided to discuss, to develop more and further this local pact for deprived neighborhoods. And this work is the results of a cooperation with different countries. There was Poland, Spain, France, and Germany, but we also had the regional level and the local level with the city of Łódź, sorry for the pronunciation, in Poland, Lille in France, and Barcelona in Spain. So this is also linked with the PO5 of the future programming period, and it is how we can implement and have a guidance for national policy to target action on specific on deprived neighborhoods. So this work has key dimensions, which are the multi-level governance. We saw that it was really important to have all the level involved, the participation of all local stakeholders and also inhabitants, which is really important for the European level for sure, but also for city contract in France. We really tried hard to have inhabitants participate in the strategy of their neighborhood. So we can also, by the way, send you also some documents on this local pact for deprived neighborhoods to implement the next programming period. So thank you. I hope that I was not too long.
No, that was fantastic. Sabrina, thanks so much. Thanks for joining the dots. So you've just referenced CLLD. We'll be picking up on CLLD, community-led local development, in our third webinar session where we're looking at governance. Thanks also for mentioning Łódź and some other cities which are trying to do things differently. We'll be hearing from Łódź, as Sally just said, in our next session. So again, these are not all standalone blocks. We might like to use an image of blocks, but they're actually all integrated and connected. So that's super helpful. Three little quick things from me that I thought were really good to link into, and we'll come back to this with Arno and with our questioners. You talked to us about the long term, and again, you get the sense from France that this is a long-term developmental process. You know, it hasn't just happened overnight. You also talked about capacity building at a national level. Again, that's something which was, picked up in our initial polls with the audience, and it's always interesting to see how we approach these issues. You used the phrase deprived neighbourhoods, but I know you're also looking at this question of language, special neighbourhoods, trying not to stigmatise. So there's an interesting conversation going on about how we move away from a different way of looking at neighbourhoods which have quite often deep-seated social and economic problems. And then there's point of PO5, and we might pick up on that with Thomas. How we bring all this closer to bring Europe closer to our people, how we make this real and tangible. So all of those things are in my head. I'm sure the audience similarly is absorbing that. So thanks so much for those insights. Sally's keeping an eye on the chat, on the questions. Again, we'll be coming back after the next presentation to bring some questions back to Sabrina. But let's keep going. Let's jump from France to Finland. Let's jump to Espoo specifically. Delighted to have Tuula Antola, who's the Director of Economic Development in the city, but more importantly is one of the key people involved in the ICA network, which is a network of 6 Finnish cities. Here we want to shine a light on the link with smart specialisation, but I think the collaborative model that Tuula is going to talk about is also really, really interesting for you to hear about this morning. Tuula, great to have you with us. Delighted to give you this space to speak to us, and I'm looking forward to your comments. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Ed. Dear colleagues, hello Europe. I'm very pleased to share with you some learnings and insights related to our 6-city strategy, 6 Aika, which is a cooperation approach and program of the 6 biggest cities in Finland. At the City of Espoo, I'm working at the Mayor's office, and I'm heading the unit which is responsible for employment services, immigration affairs, international affairs, economic development, city marketing, and business services. I have been working with this program since its beginning from 2014. I was the first chair of the board of directors, and I'm again in the same role now, since we are rotating the chair from a city to city yearly. And I think this rotation model tells quite a lot about the 6-city strategy and its collaborative mode itself. So our 6-city strategy is all about collaboration and co-creation. The base of the program is joint ambitions and challenges of the cities, such as urbanization, climate change, and aging. We, the 6 cities, have combined our forces to find new solutions for these challenges and to be more powerful than any of us could be alone. The program presents a solution-oriented thematic approach, considering the network of the 6 cities as a unique marketplace for developing innovative solutions coming from companies and R&D organizations, such as universities. The strategy focuses on tackling burning urban aspects, recognized both regional and city-specific level, and which are also aligned with national and European innovation and sustainability strategies. Cities are at the heart of this process. Obviously, the 6 cities have also different emphases on the city strategies and smart specialization. However, we are similar enough to find mutually interesting topics to work with together and to learn from each other. Next, please. In Finland, 5% of the national ERDF is addressed on sustainable urban development. And actually, this 6-city strategy is the only program to implement this. About 80% of the 100 million euros budget is targeted for the ERDF projects, and the rest are ESF projects. The primary objective of the strategy is to strengthen Finland's competitiveness by using our cities, the 6 biggest ones, as innovation and experimentation environments and platforms. The strategy aims at producing service innovations, but also at enhancing and promoting competitive business opportunities and employment. Besides this, the intention is to get the cities to cooperate more in concrete development projects and to share the results widely. So we are not just comparing notes and telling how good and wonderful we are, but we are actively working together on a concrete level. So far, almost 60 projects have already started, of which half finished, and there are 25 projects running at the moment. And the next, please. It was clear since the beginning that we didn't narrow down our thematics in advance. Instead, we wanted to develop cities as experimentation platforms for new products and services to create world-class reference sites. And also some important elements to be mentioned are also utilizing of open data and interfaces and co-creation methodology on a quadruple helix mode. Therefore, we have concentrated much on how to develop and not only what to develop. I think that has been really important for us. Sustainable urban development it's much about building innovation capabilities of the whole community, not only developers. This requires also organizational level resources and capabilities from the cities, also the new ones. And this has to be understood also by the politicians, as Jonas Bylund pointed out on his comment earlier on the chat during this session. The 6-city co-creation model is a good tool for incorporating various important aspects of sustainable urban development strategy, including our joint global agenda, Agenda 2030 with SDGs, into everything we do in the cities. Next, please. Here is an overview of our project portfolio since 2014. The strategy is implemented via projects which vary thematically from smart mobility to learning and circular economy, using the tools of digitalization, open data and interfaces, and bottom-up oriented co-creation methods. The low carbon agenda was not that much emphasized in the very beginning, 2014. In fact, the first open calls related to the topic were arranged in 2016. And since then, the importance has increased dramatically, and all the 6 cities have set their carbon neutrality goals on an ambitious level. Like in Espoo, we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. So setting the frame to a wide level has served the city's needs. We have been able to adapt to changing needs as we go on. Next, please. And then some examples from Espoo. The co-creation model with different stakeholders in Espoo schools is something I'm especially happy and proud of. With the support of the 6-city strategy, we have been able to open up almost all our schools and even some of the early childhood education as innovation platforms. In this model, we are developing both new learning environments and services, as well as new business opportunities for the companies. The operating model guarantees an easy and safe way to co-create with different actors systematically and efficiently, providing the participating companies a real-life development environment and, very important, also understanding of the daily life of schools, teachers and pupils. The operating model provides also ready-to-use contract templates to ensure that the cooperation is fair, ethical and mutually beneficial. Co-created with the City of Espoo Schools stamp or label has already supported companies such as Mindifier on their launch to international markets in Asia and US. This operating model has been scaled up to other Espoo services, but also to other cities in Finland, such as Oulu and Turku. Next stop, other European cities. Next, please. Make with Espoo is an open call for developers and companies to join us for co-creation. To support this co-creation process, we have recently launched a digital Make with Espoo platform that supports sharing of ideas for co-creation. Also, we are further developing the innovation platforms and ecosystem tools to support renewal of the city services and urban environments on a sustainable manner, with a focus on, for example, city properties, social and employment services in a resource-efficient way. At the same time, we want to provide companies with data and customer knowledge, as well physical and virtual spaces to foster their new business development, and therefore also their growth opportunities and creation of new jobs. Next, please. In the end, I think the main motivator of the 6 cities strategy with its projects, concepts and activities is to support happy and healthy living of people in Finland and all around Europe. Especially in this post-COVID, or still COVID, not yet even post-COVID world where we are living at, we need to be smarter, more sustainable and collaborative than ever on everything we do. The whole community, all of us, is needed to build the cities and Europe of the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tula. I'm going to give you a round of applause. It's a bit strange being in this echo, this quiet space. And, you know, your model where you have cities who so often compete with one another, and competition is part of the city life, but this collaboration model I think is super interesting. I'll just remind our audience that this is one of the case studies in the handbook, so you can hear more about it in the handbook, and obviously we'll be sharing Tula's slides. Stay with us, Tula, because we may have some questions and some observations. We'll bring Sabrina back in too. We're going to finish this session today by going to Thomas de Bretun to talk a bit about the future programming period. So don't leave before we have a chance to have that conversation. But for now, let's bring Arno back in. Arno, again, you've been sitting with your keynote listener cap on, with your antennae twitching, listening to Tula's input, listening to Sabrina's input. Again, maybe just share with us some of the headlines that you're picking up from those two presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tula. Thank you, Sabrina, for two excellent and very interesting presentations. You know, both of there's a lot of kind of common learnings, if you like, from these presentations. Both really demonstrate strong links to already sort of pre-existing policy frameworks, if you like, which is one of the things that the handbook also emphasizes. So in the case of France, that is the national urban policy, the politique de la ville. In the case of Finland, it's more linked to the smart specialization strategies that were already there on the regional level. And that really kind of, those frameworks provide, well, it kind of works both ways, I guess. It provides an opportunity to kind of, if you like, introduce SUD to a wider group of stakeholders and actors and use these platforms to kind of engage with those actors. And but it also provides an opportunity for this kind of multi-sectoral approach, which really came out very strong, I think, in the case of France in particular, where there's a lot of cross-sectoral kind of integration going on. The other thing that Ed also already picked up, I think, in both cases where there's examples of sort of a strong commitment to the involvement of citizens in the in not just the creation of the strategies, but also particularly in Finland in terms of the implementation of the strategy, the communication of the strategy, all is kind of thought of with this kind of this idea of the citizen being an integral part of the strategy process. So that, of course, links very closely, as we will hear later on from Thomas, to bringing Europe close to the cities. So in France, I heard that it was part of as part of the contract discussions of the NUP, of the National Urban Policy, there are citizens councils involved. So it would be very interesting to hear sort of how these councils are involved in that design process and what their roles are, because I think one of the learnings from the current period is that at least in some cases, this involvement of citizens can be quite challenging. It can be difficult to animate citizens. It can be difficult to translate what are quite technical documents. So that is an important part of the strategy process. Very impressed with the commitment in Finland to kind of try and translate these highly technical documents and data into meaningful data for citizens. And I think a specific point, maybe more related to France, is this contractual and deal-making approach that is almost a part of every SUD strategy. But I think some countries have a tradition of this kind of contractual deal-making approach, which kind of really stresses the iterative nature of developing strategies by having this conversation between different levels of government and creating mutual understanding and capacity. And then of course, I mean, in many ways, the Finnish strategy, the final point is that the Finnish strategy is quite unique, I think it's fair to say, across Europe, that it has this network of cities that really focuses on the collaboration between the different cities. Now, it is unique in terms of the depth with which that exists in Finland. I think it's, but in other countries, we also see that SUD has been this kind of driver or a catalyst to develop networks at the national level between cities, or at least integrate it into already pre-existing networks, which provide a framework for lesson learning. So those were my observations from those two very interesting and excellent presentations.
Thanks very much, Arno. Really insightful. And I think, all of this is making me think that all of these 6 sessions are going to be so closely interlinked. And we'll be returning to many of these conversations that we've started up this morning. So stay with us, and we'll say a little bit at the end about what's happening after today. I'm going to bring in Thomas de Bethune now, because a lot of this session has been inevitably looking backwards and looking at where we are now. And we'd like to maybe just sort of change the perspective a little bit and maybe look forward, because we're on the cusp of the new programming period. Many of you who are managing authorities or cities or ministries are looking forward to what's happening next. We're trying to learn from these experiences to improve things next time around. So Thomas, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, super. Thanks again for joining us. And I guess, you know, we didn't want to PowerPoint people too much today, so we've tried to keep the presentation short. We scripted this just as a little sort of dialogue, just to get some real-time reflections from you. So, and a lot of this morning we've been talking about what's been happening in the current programming period. And from what you've heard, what are the key things people need to think about building on from what we've heard from Rotterdam, from France, from Finland? For the new programming period, what are the things you're taking for those three inputs, and maybe from Arno's comments also, that we need to be really thinking about to make sure we maximize these opportunities next time around?
Yeah, that's a really broad question, and there was a whole webinar for answering this. But so some key points. I heard from different level in terms of territorial level that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Every territories are different, and we can see from national perspective in France with the regeneration in the displaced neighborhoods, or from Finland with this, I would say, tentacular network of cities along specific priorities, which actually broaden to much more impact, or from Rotterdam with their long-lasting strategies that everyone finds its own way with its strengths, potentials to develop its own strategies. That's the first thing I think. The second is that the challenges, the needs that we could hear about are, on one side, really global. You know, climate change, digital, migration, competitiveness. This is really things and every city, and with the crisis now, with the COVID, with the sanitary issues, we are all facing this, and cities will have and are at the first line of this, and we can together discuss and get some knowledge about this. But on the same time, there is also local issues that we cannot discuss specifically here, and that need also to take on board. So there is this mix when thinking about strategy, what we should keep in mind on the specificity of every territory. And another element I take is also the knowledge and the need of knowledge. It's not only the knowledge from big studies, international or data, it's important, but also knowledge from the ground. So this mix between the experience, the measurement of what is happening on the ground, and the knowledge from the studies gets and allows to have a good analysis status of the local situation, and let's keep that in mind, that knowledge takes time to be developed, but are the basis for a good strategy. So the long-term vision, I mentioned it in my first intervention, is something we should aim at. It takes time. It's not a one-day achievement. It starts for many cities already long time ago, and here the discussion is more about how to make it evolve in the current context, more than really starting from scratch. For those who are starting from scratch, definitely the handbook is already a good starting point, and the structural funds definitely a good frame for that, but it should not be only the structural funds to help for it. It should be broader than this. That's it. That's a key element I got.
Thank you. And you kind of peppered your input there with some observations around the scale of disruption and change all around us. We're having this session not face to face because of COVID, the pandemic. You talked about the climate emergency. We're living in very disruptive times. In terms of the policy itself, how much continuity will there be from the Commission side in terms of the resources and funds? Is it kind of business as usual? Are we making fundamental alterations? Maybe just share a couple of key things that you'd like to just draw people's attention to, because you're in the thick of some of those developments at the moment.
Yeah, as you know, I work in DG Regio. We are in charge of the whole cohesion policy funding. So really a major policy for the union, but it's also a policy which has really ends into the lowest level in territorial dimension, meaning we work really with municipalities, and this is extremely positive. I would say there is a certain continuity in the policy, which is really good, because we shouldn't change all the time for the sake of novelty. And at the same time, I would say there is a reinforcement of the policy for the territorial dimension. Let me explain in a couple of words. We've got moving from a number of policy objectives. We are now streamlining into 5 policy objectives, with one which is really at the core of it for what we discussed today, which is the policy objective 5, which has been mentioned today, the EU closer to citizen. We also call it the policy objective of all the work which is done below the regional level. So when we work with cities, with municipalities, with local authorities, but also participation, all these policies that are closer to the people, the ones people can see. We have also not changed the tools, but we have better include them in the regulations. It's the ITI, Integrated Territorial Investment, CLLDs, Community Locally Led Development, or any other tools that fulfill a certain number of criteria. And these criteria are actually the ones we will look at in the different webinars we are organizing, and that's why we organize them actually, because this is really something we want to work with and to get into the depth of the content, to be sure that the local authorities, when working to program the funds, will know what there is behind in terms of experience. The integrated approach, the governance, all these, I would say, key buzzwords that we are using and that can actually fill a whole bag of different knowledges. It's really broad to say what is integrated approach, what means governance, multi-level governance, participation. We all can use these words, but in practice, how do you transform that into a reality? This has not changed in the regulation. It is still there. We are only getting deeper into how to transform that into operational level, into real projects. We have also in the regulation a continuity into the earmarking, meaning that a part of the fund will be allocated to cities. It's 5% in the current regulation. It might become 8% in the future. It's still under discussion. There will be an increase, obviously. We also have worked more into support for technical assistance for cities with the European Urban Initiative. Some of you might have heard about it. But also, there is a continuity in the need to have strategies for funding. And these strategies can be the same ones as the one you used during this programming period, 14-20, but needs to be adapted, updated with the current situation. And obviously, there is a need of updating simply because of the crisis we are facing now. But you see changes in the continuity. There is also a change in the way we approach the territorial dimension. I would say in the past we have been much more at administrative border, much more at neighboring level. Now we're getting really closer to the reality of the territorial dimension of cities, which is the functional urban area. And we expect some more insights from member states, from regions, from cities about their all territories that are of the concerns of the thematics they want to fund. Mobility cannot be handled at a local level or extra local level, for example. And you will see also, for those who are well informed in the regulations, that there is some broader scope for security and tourism, for example, which are also items that were tackled in the past but not directly identified. So this is also some new elements in the continuity, I will say.
Thanks a lot, Tom. So maybe just a final question. We started today's session with a poll from the audience, asking them what was their starting point, what were their reflections. A number of people on the call quite new to this. As we said, very few said we've got this nailed down. We're super knowledgeable and expert. So we're all on a learning curve here. lots of managing authorities, lots of cities, lots of national people too. What tips could we give them about how do they hit the ground running from the series of webinars we've got, and in preparation? We've heard some key things from our speakers today, but anything you would suggest to people in terms of making sure they're as prepared as possible for the new programming period once it arrives?
Yeah, quickly, 4 points. The first one is work on your strategy. Obviously, it's a start to go with even little, small ones. Objectives together, share them with all. Do not limit yourself. Go with citizens, debates, and get the political endorsement, and step by step come to a broader strategies. It is not something that comes in one day. I have repeated it a couple of times today. I think it's really important. And update the ones you have. Go with the figures, the numbers, and think already ahead. The second element is really develop already the project pipeline. Often, and I will surprise you, and I will surprise some of them, and it's a bit provocative, but money is often not the issue. The issue is the good project. When there is a good project, there is always possibility to get money. It is important to mobilize the people who have, and the stakeholders who have projects, to let them understand what is the political, but also the strategical vision that the municipalities, the authorities have. And to develop projects, really it takes time. It takes a long time. And projects that mature and that are ready can find money at a certain moment. It's maybe not tomorrow, but it will. From my experience, it will always come at a certain moment. So you can already work on projects while working on strategy. One cannot wait, shouldn't wait the other. And the project can always adapt. The third one is that cities are at the front line of the global challenges. Sustainable development goals, greenhouse gas emission reduction. From the studies, we can see at an international level, cities and municipalities are the ones that will have to deliver and that will contribute the most to these objectives, more than regional and national level. They are the ones on the first line. So it means that they are the one we should trust on and we should empower to work. So cities should also claim their share, and they should push for that, and they should lobby, and they should show their value added. So continue to promote your work, continue to valorize it, and to show to your different national and regional authorities how much at local level you are contributing to their global objectives and to their national objectives. I think this is also important to get your share of the different funds and priorities that are discussed for the moment. And my last tips is obviously, if you want to know more, follow the next webinars. We want you to learn more about the way the structural funds are organized, but also in general to develop your strategies. And there will be a couple of them in the next weeks on the different items. And if you and your question was how to get well prepared, this is a good way to do it.
Okay, brilliant. Thomas, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. Always great to see you. And I'm sure our audience are leaning in and really taking good note of the tips you have to share with them. Before Sally and I wrap up the session and tell you what happens next, I'm just going to bring Martina back in actually, because we have an interesting question from Paloma Munoz about the question is, do we plan to elaborate some guidance on integrated strategic urban development? How to include or looks like. So essentially it's about guidance. How do we give people additional guidance? You keep joining the webinars, as Thomas said, but Martina, you might have something specific to pick up on that question?
Yes, indeed. Actually, there is no binding guidance to be developed on the SUD. On the contrary, we share a different approach, the learning approach. We think that we must learn together at all levels in order to make SUD strategies effective. For that purpose, the GRC is now working on a self-assessment tool that can help local authorities, but also managing authorities in understanding how they can work out the critical points in their strategies for the next programming period. And we are also working to populate our handbook online with more examples, cases and tools that can be used for the same purpose. So this is what we are working, and your inputs would be indeed very relevant to help us in developing this task. Finally, if I can just share a few words, I really thank all the speakers, the other speakers, because it's always amazing to see how much has been done across Europe in the field of sustainable urban development strategies, and even more amazing how the examples that were provided disclose a world of opportunities to be addressed in the next programming period. All of the different cases present a specific way of approaching SUD, very interesting. They address key issues, and let me underline that all of them have been developed under the same EU regulation. So really, the world is full of opportunity to be grasped for better urban development.
Thanks a lot, Martina, for that invitation. Can we just go back to the slide before, please? Okay, so here's what happens next. So we've talked a lot about content. There's the link. I think you have the material. We'll also be, as Sally said in the chat, we'll be emailing you with content from today. The presentations will be online. So this is the beginning of a series of conversations. So lots more to come. It's great to be up and running. So make full use of the handbook. Here's some specific actions, linking into what Thomas just said. From what we've heard today, dialogue is really important between managing authorities, urban authorities. This takes time. Trust is not a word we've heard, but also trusted relationships really matter. Embedding urban priorities. We talked a bit of the spatial territorial mismatch sometimes between the priorities of cities and the operational program issues. So again, that's really important too. And then the final point, which Martina has just said very eloquently, is let's carry on sharing our experience. I'm going to hand over to Sally to remind us of what's coming up after today. Sally?
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, thanks for everybody for a fantastic start to this webinar series. I found that really interesting. Thanks especially to the city cases who are willing to share their experience and their difficulties and their challenges. Brilliant. Thanks so much. So next, can we have the next slide, please? The next session is on territorial focus, where we're going to be looking at how you define the right spatial dimension for your strategy, with inputs from 3 different cities who've done quite different approaches with their sub-strategies. Brno, Łódź, and Murcia are going to talk about spatial dimension of sustainable urban development. So please join us. It's next Monday, the 9th of November, same time, 10 till 12. We look forward to seeing you then. We'll send you links of the content from today and the links for the next session next Monday. Thanks so much to everybody. Thanks, Ed, and we'll see you soon for the next session. Best way to prepare. You had it from Thomas. The best way to prepare for the future cohesion policy is to join us on these webinars. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll see you session number 2. Okay. Bye-bye now. Thanks to all our speakers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.